Hello and welcome to Click on Sports. I'm your host, Harry Kettle. Today we are joined by a very special guest. He is a professional wrestler who has competed all around the world, including in WWE. It is none other than Chris Masters, also known as Chris Adonis. Chris, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, my friend. And first off, it may seem like an odd question.
Wait, first off, can I just say I love your English accent, and I really miss the UK. I don't think I've been out. This is the longest stretch I haven't been out there. What a great place to wrestle.
Oh, it's great. When would your next date be over here? Have you got anything set up, or are you kind of just hoping for something soon?
I think possibly next year for 5-star wrestling, I believe, but nothing's been confirmed yet. And you never know. I constantly frequent PCW, although it's been a while now. But I think I'm pretty due for a comeback over there, at least a one-shot return.
Oh, absolutely. Two very good companies as well. And like I said, this may seem like an odd question initially, but you personally have had some very interesting names in the business thus far, like we've just said, Masters, Adonis. Did you play any part in those, or were those names kind of given to you?
Both of them were given to me. Masters was given to me like my second week in OVW. Wasn't even WWE yet, as in the developmental system. And I think it was Dr. Tom Pritchard told me that I was no longer Mordetsky, I was Masters. So, I was really just happy to be there, so I didn't question it. And I didn't necessarily think Masters was cool at first, but it grew on me with time, actually. So, and it's much easier it's much easier than Mordetsky, let's be honest, and it's much easier to spell. So, a lot of times I just go by Mordetsky or Masters just because so many people know me as that.
Yeah. So people tend to have different experiences with things like OVW and developmental. What was your experience like down there?
Oh, I loved it. It was tough initially just because I was a wrestling fan my whole life, but then when you enter the wrestling world, you don't necessarily count for how many unwritten rules there are, as far as the business, the boys, and etiquette and whatnot. But they're all there for a certain reason. You know what I mean? So that the young guys come in and you pay your dues and you respect, guys who've been in the business before you, who paved the way. You respect the guys who have drawn money, and then. It was a lot of fun. It really was. I went to Louisville, Kentucky. It was my first time out of, leaving home and living off on my own. I never went to college. I was only 19 years old. So, it was a little, scary and culture shock at first, I guess. But, with time, it just became, it's your last bit of innocence is in the developmental system before you actually get called up to WWE. Then everything becomes very serious. There's so much money at stake. There's sink or swim. So, you really got to kind of cherish those memories where you're just kind of, there's not as much stress. You're developing, you're learning, you're having fun. You've got this group of people. There was from Matt Morgan, Johnny Jeter, Mickey James, Muhammad Hassan. There was a lot of guys down there that, I really became good friends with. The whole crew was really tight. So it was fun. It was really I always just kind of, equivalent it to my version of college. I went there at 18 and I was caught on the road by the time I was 20. And, we went there every morning at 8 a.m. and left at like 1 p.m.
So when you first began to start working on building your body and kind of making yourself into this superhuman type athlete, was the goal always to be a featured star in the WWE?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I didn't even start working out until I decided I was going to be a pro wrestler. That was what I wanted to do. And that was probably around 15 or 16. And I can remember because the year prior to that, I even had a weightlifting class, like PE class in first period, and I wouldn't do anything. I would literally just sit around. And I don't even know what I was doing with myself. I don't know. I was just wondering why these guys were trying to lift such heavy weight. What was the point? What were they getting from it? But so then you fast forward to a year later, and then I just decided, through it being a hobby and loving it, that this is something I wanted to pursue. And it just seemed like the first logical step because I was also really skinny, when I was young. So I knew that no matter what, I didn't know I didn't necessarily think I had to be 300 pounds or anything like that, but I knew that I needed to put on some weight. So I started weight lifting and, just educating myself on nutrition and whatnot.
So you said you were quite skinny when you were younger. Were you not that into sports, or were there any sports in particular that you liked or enjoyed playing when you were younger?
Man, I mean, I was the wrestling nerd throughout all that time. I played water polo, which a lot of people don't take seriously or whatever, but it's a tough sport, and but I never did it seriously. And I was backyard wrestling when I was a kid. I was just, I've been obsessed with this my whole life, pretty much. I mean, as young as 8 years old. So I mean, that doesn't leave much time. From 1 to 6, you have your little hobbies here and there, but I pretty much picked up wrestling around 8, maybe 9 years old. And, it was always my thing, even throughout high school. While I would have been doing that, I was still on the weekends going to the park and wrestling in these, what we thought at the time were highly skilled, type technical matches that we put together and tried to emulate WWF at the time. But it was a lot of fun.
In terms of being maybe away from the squared circle, are there certain hobbies or interests that you personally have that people may not know about?
Oh, I love bodybuilding, or everybody knows that, but I love politics. I have a very, very passionate interest about politics and social issues, in the United States and the world in general. But, and so I'm very fascinated by that whole process. And I'd also say I love basketball. Basketball is probably what I use to replace wrestling. Is not in terms of, I'm still a fan of wrestling, and I love it and I do it. You know what I mean? And it's my ultimate passion. But once you're in the business, I think I was searching for something that I could watch that I wasn't. So what's the word I'm looking for? I was just, once you get into wrestling, you're so you're in it all the time. It's kind of hard to separate yourself and watch it as a fan. So, basketball was really a great thing for me because I loved it when I was young. And I've always kind of loved it. I'm a Laker guy. I was born in LA, but, wrestling just kind of always overshadowed things. So I kind of took basketball and used that as kind of my replacement hobby of something I can just watch the athletes and be in awe of their skills and not really know the guys or be too closely attached to it. And I think those are the main ones. I mean, I love shoes. I'm a shoe addict. I'm a freaking we were just going through my storage. I have like 80 pairs of sneakers. So
wow.
Those are 3 things off the top of my head that people might not know. I think a lot of people know the basketball one.
Well, the politics one in particular is quite interesting. Do you when it comes to giving your opinions on it? I think a lot of people get a lot of heat online when they give their opinions on politics if they're in the sport world or the wrestling world. Do you enjoy interacting with others when it comes to talking about, say, things like Trump and how the state of the country right now in terms of politics, or do you kind of prefer to keep your opinions to yourself or your closed circle?
Well, it's funny you asked me that. You got to check out my Instagram, Chris Masters 310. Chris Masters 310, yeah, because you'll know right then if I'm out about my political stances. But to answer your question here for the listeners and for the show, I think I don't like to necessarily stir up people, and I don't like to necessarily always give my opinion on things just because I know that we have in the U.S. the country is very divisive right now, and it's very split down the middle. So I know that no matter what I put out there, I'm going to get a lot of crap for it. But at the same time, and I don't like stirring up crap. You know what I mean? Whether there's people who think it's positive, I just don't like hearing people come back and talking shit to me and all that, and the negativity that it brings. But to me, I admire athletes like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Muhammad Ali, who took strong stances, unlike Michael Jordan, who, did the smart business thing by not alienating anybody. He said that, Republicans buy sneakers too. So he didn't come out on any social stances that he should have because, he's protecting his brand and protecting his sales. And I understand that. But to me, when you look back, I mean, Muhammad Ali's story is so fascinating. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I mean, it's just, these are guys to be admired. And especially in today's climate with Donald Trump obviously dominating the news and just, dominating the world with just headlines every day. I think it's gotten to the point where I'm watching the TV cringing every day, but every once in a while it's so bad that it needs to be pointed out, and whether people like it or not. And that's to go back to what you're saying. I don't necessarily interact with people about it on social media, but I'll just put out my opinions or something that I find, or like Eminem put out a video last week, and it's pretty brutal about the way he does a freestyle rap about Trump. It's pretty brutal, but at the same time, it was powerful to watch, and it was really, really good. So, I mean, I put it out in support of it. I thought it was amazing. And then, even when LeBron James had tweeted about him uninviting Steph Curry and the Warriors to the White House, I mean, we're just seeing things that are just ridiculous and so unpresidential and just so awful, just in terms of the worldview of the United States. I mean, I can only imagine how the world is looking at us right now. And I think it's important for people to know, like, I'm in Canada right now, and they, for the most part, know that America is not all like that. But it's important for the rest of the world to know that, that we're not all like Donald Trump. I mean, that's an American stereotype, yes, but, there's a bigger portion of us that are in opposition of what he stands for, his narcissism, his misogyny, his, it's unbelievable. I can't understand anybody who voted for him, and my mom and my dad voted for him. So,
well, you briefly mentioned Canada there. How is it being up in Canada in comparison to being in Los Angeles?
Man, I got to be honest, it kind of sucks. I mean, we were there for a couple of days, and then I get back to Toronto here, and it's just you forget how nice it is in LA. Like every day, I mean, the traffic was hell, and it was a lot of stress because I had to get a lot of stuff done while I was there in a short period of time. But, I get up here and Toronto's a beautiful city. I mean, I do like it. But when you're born in Santa Monica like I was, and you're used to, you're just used to LA, I mean, everybody's home is home sweet home, right? So for me, even more so just with Los Angeles, it just is like I miss the waking up to that weather, that nice weather that brings on positive energy and makes you want to leave the house and just makes you want to go out into the world. And, you just don't have as much of that vibe here in Toronto. There's none of the perks. It's just a city. It's a nice city, but it's just a city.
So when you were travelling up and down the roads on a consistent basis, 250 or however many days a year, was there a particular factor or element about the travel that you hated, or were you kind of okay with it all?
Yes and no about both of them. I mean, I don't know anything else now, so if I'm at home more than 7 days, I go stir crazy. So I do love to travel. I love to wake up in a different place every day. I think part of that is just because I'm used to it. And so once you get in a pattern of doing that for so many years, it's just like when you're not doing that, it kind of feels like the movie Groundhog's Day. You just feel like it's repetition. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, it's just I've become so used to that's what I'm accustomed to, and that's what I identify with work. But I will say it on the other side that traveling just is brutal. Airplanes hurt. They're very uncomfortable. I mean, my knees are constantly hurting in them, and then the car rides. I mean, it's not as bad now as with WWE. WWE is a job that you're married to. You're there on the road 4 days a week. You're driving at least about 200 miles every night, usually, and you're performing 4 days a night. So on top of the flight. So, I mean, that's much more physically demanding than anything I'm doing now, because for the most part now I'll usually get 5 days, a 5-day break, and work weekends and, work during the week every once in a while. So, in simple terms, basically I'm not married to wrestling anymore as I was with WWE, although I still do it for a living.
Now, in terms of your actual WWE career, you had some unbelievable moments, and like you were working with some of the best stars in the world. But there's one moment in particular that stands out to me when you were in the Elimination Chamber. It was you, Carlito and John Cena. You were in kind of like the final three. You and Carlito had been working together throughout the match. Before that, when you're in the back and you're told that you're going to be in the final three of a match in, say, a WWE Championship setting, do you kind of have to pinch yourself and think, you know, I can't believe how far I've come?
Well, not at the elimination. I don't know if I had so many moments like what you just described before that I don't know if I was doing it by the time I got to the elimination. I think, you know, I wouldn't just say the Elimination Chamber match. I'd say the moment I even got called to the road, the first time I had Earl Hebner referee a match, the first time I heard my music, the first time you know, when I debuted on television, the first time I worked at Madison Square Garden, when they told me I was going to work with Shawn Michaels in my first program, which was, you know, my childhood hero. I mean, there were so many pinch me moments throughout that time frame because, you know, obviously I was new in the business and I was working with guys that from the generation before me. A lot of the guys that I had watched and grown up. I don't want to say grown up on it. Always makes them feel old, but you know, I mean, these were the guys, the generation before me, and I was watching them up until the point that I actually made it into the business. So, you know, everything was kind of a pinch me moment. I mean, because even after that Elimination Chamber match was WrestleMania was just a couple months later. I mean, that was a pinch me moment. So, you know, the Chamber match went really well, though. I mean, on a side note, I'll say the story was good. I'll say that I was working really well at that point. So everything about that went well. But I wouldn't just narrow it down to that as a pinch me moment. I just gave you the list. There were so many.
Yeah. And back in the day, you were name-dropped famously or infamously by CM Punk during a segment regarding your firing. What were your feelings at that time period in general? And when he mentioned your name after you'd been fired by the company, when he mentioned your name on WWE TV, how did that make you feel, knowing that people were really sorry to see you go? Because there were a lot of fans around that time that were sorry to see you go as well.
I'll say, I mean, I was heartbroken at the time, only because I really got into a place where I learned how to work in the ring very well. I mean, a lot of it was done on Superstar, so not everybody's seen it. But for the people who did, a lot of anybody who saw me work was noticing the progression I had made, and I'd really applied myself to that and to the art of what we do, the storytelling, the you know, the theater, as I call it, of wrestling. You know, and it really became something. It really became my comfort place. You know, it no longer became you know, anxiety. I mean, because I was always excited about it, but I was always so nervous and had anxiety at the same time. You know, just because you know, that's what happens when you're new in the business, going back to those years that you're just talking about. But I got to a place where I was so comfortable in the ring and I was getting so good and I was really enjoying it so much every week, just progressing, watching it back, seeing what I liked, what I didn't like, and then coming back next week and, you know, improving upon that. And I was much more mature and I was ready at that point because you got to figure when I first debuted, I was 20 or 21. And now you fast forward to that, and I was, you know, maybe around 30 at that point or whatever. So, you know, everything was, you know, in line. I was kind of basically in my prime in terms of maturity and work and just, you know, just every bar you can possibly check. So I was heartbroken about the whole thing. And, you know, it definitely was something that I was just more heartbroken that was being taken away from me. You know what I mean? Like, because I enjoyed it so much. In terms of CM Punk, when I initially heard it, I mean, I thought it was really nice because I know that when he talked about each individual getting released, he added that little bit in for me, which I know he actually meant because he had actually pointed it out to me several times, talking about how hard I worked to become better, to go back to my previous point. So, I appreciated that, although at the same time I know that it was something that was talked about that they would address us in the promo by Hunter and the powers that be. So, you know, as always, you know, it's a little conflicted because, you know, they're using you to further a storyline and get a reaction, you know, so you can see what I'm saying. You'd be a little conflicted about that. But, you know, if nothing else, I'm happy that he threw something in there that was a shoot, that he did mean, that wasn't just meant to point out the fact that I got fired for a reaction.
When you look at your career right now in 2017, are you happy with where you are, or are you someone who is always looking towards the future?
No, I'm not happy where I am, but I've been content for a while just because I've had a rough couple of years in terms of battling injuries and whatnot. Like I've had to change a lot of things. So, I went through a point where up until my ACL injury a couple of years ago, I was still on pace to having, great matches everywhere I went, all over the world post my WWE run. But then, I had my ACL injury. I had to have surgery for that. That put me down for quite a while, and it's something that takes a lot of rehab. And then I had a couple little other minor injuries while coming back that happened with Impact Wrestling just this year. So, it's been a little touch and go, but, right now I'm getting to the point where I'm healthy, like I'm healthy enough and I'm feeling, because that was the thing is for a long time, I really just needed to get myself back healthy again before I could be hungry to do anything. And hungry like I was, in my last year in WWE. Because, I was hungry. That's why I was working so hard and also why it hurt so much to be released when I had made such huge strides. And I was told that I was going to get pushed as well, by Hunter and plenty of people, So, but, I'm in kind of I'm in a great situation right now with Impact Wrestling and being with Eli Drake and, him being the champion. And I think it presents a lot of opportunity. And I think if I stay on track, like I am now, I stay healthy and I'm able to go out there and do my thing and perform and get myself back on track, then I think, I think the sky's the limit. I think, I can do whatever I want in this business, in terms of that platform. So, like I said, the first step was getting healthy. I'm there at Impact Wrestling now and it's gone well, but, this year's just been touch and go. But, I really look forward to November 5th, Bound for Glory, and then also next year, just in general, just because I think there's a lot of great things coming. And, if nothing else, I've only gotten better than pre-injury through my training. I've started doing Olympic-style weightlifting, which has been real good for my explosion and just, getting my knees strong and getting my body to work with itself kind of in concert much more, just more kind of practical strength.
I think a lot of people right now see GFW or Impact Wrestling as being in something of kind of a rebuilding period in a lot of ways. Are you proud to be one of the focal points behind that?
Yeah, it's definitely a rebuild. A reboot, rebuild. It's all of that. But I'm definitely proud to be a part of it, just because this is. There's so much room for opportunity here. And we have a lot of good players too. So I think that the company in general has a good chance to get on solid footing. And I actually think it kind of has. I think Eli Drake is doing a good job being the top guy for GFW or Impact Wrestling at this point. And, it kind of goes from there. It starts from the top down. And then, it was all about kind of, resetting things, getting them organized and seeing who's going to be doing what and who's sticking around and who's not, and getting some stability there and then building upon that. And I think they've done a good job in terms of the television product we've put out now, what we shot, and then leading into Bound for Glory with Johnny Impact and Eli Drake and Bobby Lashley and Moose. I think there's a lot to be excited about. I think it'll take time to get people back on there, but on the bandwagon. But there's so many wrestling fans, and I know that deep down in their hearts they want an alternative. So the fans that aren't watching right now, I have confidence if we can, make a big enough. What's the term I'm looking for? Make a big enough splash to where the wrestling industry takes notice, and then maybe we can get all the people who have just been watching WWE over the last few years and not giving Impact a chance because of, maybe they weren't happy with the product in the past or whatever it might be, or maybe they just don't have the time. But, as long as we can make a splash and get people talking, there's a future for Impact Wrestling for sure.
When you analyse the state of professional wrestling in the present day, is there one aspect of the business that you would change if you could?
One aspect of the business I'd change? I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot I would change. I mean, I would have it so that, where do I even start? We'd all fly first class. We would all, they would pay for our rental cars wherever we went. They'd pay for our hotels wherever I went. They, basically wouldn't treat us like employees, but call us independent contractors. But then again, there's a lot of good things that the WWE and pro wrestling has done too, over the last few years in terms of opening up their rehab program to anybody who's worked in the company and honestly, just saving a lot of guys that have needed it. And so, I don't want to completely dog the business or anything like that. I mean, there are aspects of the business that are tough, like having to deal with politics or knowing who you can trust and who you can't. And there's all that stuff. But I'm sure there's that kind of element in all aspects of life and all different types of jobs and work environments. I just think in pro wrestling it's probably a little more profound.
Yeah.
I just, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, I think most of the wrestlers would just love to be able to go out there and perform and not have to deal with any of the extracurricular BS that goes on in the business, because we all love to do that. We all love to go out there and wrestle. It's just a lot of the other stuff that we don't want to really deal with. I mean, if we could just work house shows, I think every single day we'd all be happy with that, just because it's just get to the building, work your match, you finish the show, you get out. It's a 4-hour process, and it's enjoyable, it's fun, you make money.
Did you get a chance to maybe experiment on a lot of things on the house shows? Because people tend to say that a lot of superstars try new things on house shows, try and work out what works. Was there more of a free reign?
Oh yeah, of course. When you work with somebody, I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, a lot of times you'll work with the same guy maybe 3 nights in a row, so you'll work with them and kind of see how it goes and see in terms of the direction next night. So I mean, I would try things out at house shows, yes, but the house shows would be more about working on my just overall game, not necessarily just trying out a move or a spot, but just putting in time, just getting the crowd involved, making sure that I just went out there and gave them the best match possible. So, that's really kind of what it came down. It wasn't, there was definitely trial with guys that had never worked before and stuff like that, but it was always about going out there and putting on a show and just whether they were a Chris Masters fan or not. My goal was to at least win them over or get them to care if they hadn't by the tail end of the match, which on most nights towards the end there, I usually could.
So finally, as we kind of start to wrap things up, one last question that we like to ask people is, what can we expect in the next 18 to 24 months from Chris Masters?
Oh my God. 24, that's 2 years?
Indeed.
Oh, wow. It's funny you ask a question like that, because I'll talk to Carlito and people ask us about 2 months from now and we won't even know what the hell to say about that. So you're asking 2 years. I'd say there's probably many options. I think the primary option is to contribute to. I think I'll be with Impact Wrestling, contributing on some level, possibly the top guy, but if not, definitely involved heavily in progressing the company. And I think we'll be doing actually throughout a 2-year span. I mean, I think you're going to see a complete turnaround of the product, of the ratings, everything. As long as we keep going in the direction that we're at now. And so I figure, I'll at least be a top guy, if not main eventer, if not the champion of Impact Wrestling by that point. And if not there, I'll still be wrestling, but I'll probably start pursuing my next career in politics.
Well, Chris,
maybe a California state senator, something like that, maybe.
I think we'd all like to see the masterpiece as a state senator. Absolutely. Well, Chris, it's been fantastic speaking with you today. Can't wait to see you at Bound for Glory, and just wish you the best of luck in everything you do going forward.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and just to everyone out there who listens. It's Chris Masters 310, or Chris Adonis, I believe, 310 on Twitter, Chris Masters 310 on Instagram, and bookings and interviews is masterpiece83@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, man.